Beste mensen, welkom bij Kantelpunt en we hebben vandaag een speciale uitzending. Namelijk, we zijn live op ManiFiesta, het feest van de solidariteit in Oostende, in de studio van Facto. En onze gast vandaag hoeft waarschijnlijk geen intro, maar ik ga het toch maar doen, want ik heb bij mij Jeremy Corbyn. Hij is levenslang activist voor vrede en sociale rechtvaardigheid. Hij was ook de voormalige leider van de Britse Labour Party, oppositieleider in het parlement en sinds vorig jaar herverkozen als onafhankelijk parlementslid in het parlement in Londen. Onlangs kondigde hij ook aan dat er misschien wel een nieuwe partij in de UK zit aan te komen met heel veel nieuwe leden. En over die nieuwe partij, ook over de breuk in het barstende twee-partijenlandschap in de UK, ga ik met hem spreken over lonen, huurprijzen en natuurlijk ook over Palestina, waar hij erg mee begaan is. Deze uitzending zal verlopen in het Engels. En dat is even belangrijk om mee te geven, dus spreek je geen Engels, no worries. Je zal op YouTube, sowieso op Spotify ook trouwens, de Nederlandse ondertiteling kunnen vinden. Nog één kleine oproep. Uiteraard, ben je nog niet geabonneerd op Kantelpunt, dan is dit uiteraard de beste moment om dat te doen. De grote platformen Google en Meta draaien de kraan dicht voor de politieke advertenties. Dus wij moeten dat alleen maar doen met vrijwilligers. Dus vandaar graag ook nog jullie abonnementen en jullie duimpjes. En weet ik wat dan ook voor Kantelpunt. Voilà, Kantelpunt live vanop ManiFiesta. De wereld is koortsig. Alles verandert snel en het kan alle kanten opgaan. We hebben een nieuwe samenleving nodig. Een nieuwe samenleving waar de mens centraal staat, niet de hebzucht. Welkom bij Kantelpunt. Ik ben uw gastheer, Peter Mertens. Thank you, Jeremy Corbyn, for being here. It's not your first time at ManiFiesta. Do you become a regular from ManiFiesta?
I've been several times to ManiFiesta. I've been here on the hot days, the cold days, and usually the wet days, but it's fantastic. And my compliments to all those that volunteers and organisers that put this whole event together. It really is incredible. And I keep telling people how good it is. And you can see the reaction of the crowd out there, that this is our event every year. We come together, obviously from Belgium, but from all over Europe. And we learn from each other. We make new friends. And above all, we get ideas. And so we've been scoping out ideas to do something a bit like this in Britain. It'd be good, wouldn't it? Would you come if we did it?
Yeah, of course. We would come. ManiFiesta in Britain. Jeremy, there's a lot going on in the UK nowadays. There's also this traditional two-party system. It looked like a long time that it would be forever, this so-called two-party system. We aren't used to this kind of system. But now there was an announcement from you and independent members of parliament to maybe create a new party.
Yes. There is really a three-party system in Britain of the Conservatives, Labour and Liberal Democrats. And I'm in Parliament. I listen to them. Essentially, their message on social justice and economy is the same. Essentially, their message on foreign policy is the same. Their retreat away from environmental politics is the same. And their appeasement of the far right by endlessly talking about refugee numbers is also the same. I was, as you know, leader of the Labour Party until 2020, and I was then eventually removed from the Labour Party membership, having been suspended and then eventually removed. And my local party in Islington was denied the right to even choose a candidate for Labour. And so at that point, I announced I would stand as an independent, and a huge number of people came, locally and from outside, to help us in that campaign, and we won last July in the general election with an enormous majority, and I'm very proud of that result. I'm very proud of the people of Islington North. So in winning that, we were able to prove that by standing on a radical program, you could win. And I'm very proud that on the last leaflet we did before the election, we put on the front side of it, refugees are welcome here. It was our answer to the far right that we're saying that, and it's important to say that. And so after some thought, we then announced we'd set up a new party. The working title is yourparty.uk, and we then polling all those people that have written in to support the party, of which there are now just shy of 800,000.
Wait, there are 800,000 people in the UK saying they would be joining the new party.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
And you don't have a name yet?
No, the working name is yourparty.uk, and we're asking people to vote on their preferences, and that's coming up very strong. Your party, it's your party, it's your party. Whose party is it? It's your party, it's your party. It actually makes the thing a bit of fun.
Yeah.
And when you approach people on the doorstep with something that's a bit wacky, you actually get a hearing. So anyway, we'll see what happens on that. But essentially, the most important thing is the political message. One, we are against austerity 2.0, which is now happening. We're in favour of redistribution of power and wealth. We will end the two-child benefit cap. We will reinstate all the welfare benefit payments. We will be a party of redistribution of wealth and power. We'll also be a party of public ownership of water, public ownership of energy, and a number of other services. We will also be a party that is proud of our environmental sustainability arguments, net zero by 2030, but we'll also be a party of higher taxation and a wealth tax in order to pay for these services. What we have in Britain at the moment is unprecedented levels of child poverty, unprecedented levels of rough sleeping people living on the streets, street homelessness, and we have an unprecedented mental health crisis. These issues all go together. But at the same time, we have a government, the Labour government, that has now decided to increase arms expenditure by around £13 billion per year, which would pay for 10 years of reinstating child benefit for all children. And they are pursuing wars around the world and indeed selling arms to Israel, and including selling parts to F-35 jets. And so our party is the party of social justice, is the party of peace, is the party of international solidarity for peace. And that is the fundamental appeal. As to detailed policies and every other thing in life, they're not there yet. They won't be. But the difference between us and other parties is I'm insisting that it's grassroots. I'm insisting that it's ultra-democratic. And I'm insisting that every local organization of the party is set up has to have at least one open public event every month to receive views, discussion, maybe disagreements with people in their own community, because it's got to be a party that's genuinely representative. Because the alternative, I'll just finish on this because I think you've probably got other questions.
Yeah, I hope you have. Anyway.
I do. Yesterday we had an horrendous event in London. The far right mobilised and marched. I don't know the exact number, but I know it was very big. It was probably well over 100,000 people marched for the far right in London on a message of hate and nastiness against minority ethnic communities and eternally blaming refugees for every social problem that exists. And their appeal is based on the lack of an alternative, and their appeal is based on the lack of an understanding that refugees didn't bring about homelessness or underfunding of schools or hospitals, and that was done by those that gave tax breaks to the super rich. So there has to be an alternative. Now, there was a counter-protest by anti-racists, but it wasn't as big. We'll be working with all the anti-racist groups on building for bigger demonstrations, but also we're hoping that our next big Palestine march in October will be absolutely massive. So far in Britain, over 1.5, maybe 2 million people have done something about Palestine. So we're making it as big as we possibly can. So the politicization of people around Palestine spins over into other things as well. So I'm very optimistic and very enthusiastic about what we've done so far. And we're going to go on. We're going to be the alternative voice to the what I call the triopoly of economic and social thinking and international thinking by the other party.
When you see, Jeremy, you are talking about this manifestation of the far right, but there's also, if you see the polls in the UK, Labour is falling. They had 34%, now they're on 20%. But the strange thing is, it's not the Conservatives that are gaining the protest. There is the potential for your party, .uk, but there is also the rising of Nigel Farage, Reform UK. And how do you speak with these people who may be tempted to vote for Reform UK and extreme right? How is there any open mind in the projects you're setting up to regain people that are misled by people like Nigel Farage?
First, on the question of the Labour Party membership in 2020 was 600,000, which made it, I think, the largest political party in Europe at that time. The membership is now less than 200,000 for the Labour Party. It's gone down phenomenally. The support we achieved in 2017 was the highest vote Labour achieved this century. And even the 2019 election, which I'm well aware of what the result of that was almost 1 million votes higher than Labour got last year in the general election. It's a rather weird electoral system in Britain, which gave Labour a false majority. It's what's called a loveless landslide they had. They have been appeasing Farage because they're frightened of Farage and they're frightened of reform and their growth in support. And so what we have is Tory support, Conservative support going well down, Labour support going well down, Farage and reform going up. And even without us being yet finally registered as a party, we're already polling somewhere near to those parties, despite not yet existing. But, and you're quite right in your question, why do people vote for reform? A sense of anger, a sense of betrayal, a sense of anger about how their children are doing, overcrowded schools, insufficiency of housing, very high rents, cuts taking place in health and social services, and privatization of many services around the country. And somehow or other, Farage, a bit like Trump, is able to tap into all this discontent like they have an answer to it. They don't actually have any answer to any of it. Whereas I believe that the creativity and the strength of our sort of communal appeal of community activities is appealing. And indeed, the radical independent councillors that have been elected all over the country do have that appeal and do win. And I wasn't the only independent elected last July. There were 5 other colleagues elected as independents last July, and they did it also with limited resources and an appeal fundamentally about Gaza, but there are also the social justice appeals. So in my own community, what I try to do is reach out to my community by having an open monthly forum that anyone can come to. We don't just discuss housing, mental health, and all the issues that are so important. We then conclude the meeting by saying, what are you, the community here, going to do about it? What's your campaigning? What's your demands? And that way we did manage to push them back on cutting welfare benefits. We did manage to make some progress on regulation of the private rented sector, but still rent levels are not under control. And so it is about mobilizing people at the grassroots in very much the way you do in Belgium, because I'm very impressed with the way your party does link with the people in all your communities across language divides as well. And we're learning a lot from you. And yesterday we had a very interesting meeting with Hannes from Die Linke about what they've been doing in Germany, how they're building things. So we're listening to people, we're talking to Podemos and many others. And your party, it could be that name, is going to be very much within that family. And I look forward to being able to come here to ManiFiesta on behalf of your party.uk.
We would be very pleased. Talking about socio-economic issues even, there was this instrument to scrap the two-child benefit cap. You have to explain what it is, two-child benefit cap. I think the Conservatives, they introduced it in 2017, and then there was people asking to scrap this two-child benefit cap. But firstly, you have to explain what is a thing like a two-child benefit cap. What does it mean?
I'll explain what it is. There was used to be a Conservative Secretary of State called Ian Duncan Smith, who is a very Christian and very religious man. And he doesn't like large families. And he thinks large families cause poverty. So his solution is to blame the children. And he went to study poverty in Glasgow, where some people have large families, some have small families. And he said the problem is there's no disincentive to having a large family. It's a completely mad argument. It would be mad 150 years ago, never mind today. He then introduced a regulation which said if a family is in receipt of income support, which has with it a limit of the amount of money a family can receive every week, if they have more than 2 children, they'll get no benefit for any more children. So the 3rd, 4th or 5th child who would get around £20 a week, £25 a week benefit won't get it. So if you have a family of, say, 4 children, that means you're losing £200 a month. That's £2,500 a year. That's real poverty for those families. It's disgusting, it's disgraceful, and it's immoral. And we've campaigned on that. Labour said...
Before the elections.
I'd put it in the manifesto in 2019 that we would get rid of this thing. I meant it. And we obviously put it in my own manifesto last year, and we will adopt that policy. Starmer said he was going to get rid of it. And then they said, no, they couldn't afford to get rid of it. And also they were going to cut welfare payments for people with profound disabilities called personal independence payments. Why? Because they wanted to spend £13 billion a year more on arms expenditure and defence. So they are impoverishing children and cutting welfare benefits to spend more on weapons of war. Well, the choice is there.
The choice is there. You yourself, Jeremy, you were always a trade union man. How important in this 21st century are the contacts between your party and the projects you're putting on and the trade unions in the UK? What's the importance for you?
I've been a trade union member all my life. I used to be a trade union organiser before I became in Parliament for a union then called the National Union of Public Employees. It's now part of Unison. My job was organising part-time school cleaners and school meals workers and those kind of grades. And I was very proud to do that work. And so my commitment to unions is complete. And I want to work with unions. We have a lot of union members that have signed up for your party, and obviously I'm having meetings with all unions to bring people in. I had a big call with some teachers and others last week. But it's also important the unions recognise the average age of union members is usually above the average age of the community as a whole. It tends to be a slightly older cohort. We've got to look at that. We've also got to look at the number of particularly young people working in delivery work, in restaurants, catering, and all those that are insecure employment on 0 hours contracts with often very low levels of pay. They're normally getting minimum wage or somewhere around that. Those people absolutely need unions. So through our project, the Peace and Justice Project, we've been working with the unions to get Amazon workers into membership, to get Starbucks workers into membership, to get Costa Coffee and all the others into union membership. And we, as socialists, want, I think, to give a lot more attention to this and recruit far more people into unions and give them hope. I'll give you one little story. I was in Glasgow 2 weeks ago. I was on my way to Glasgow to do a number of events and then to speak at the Edinburgh Festival. And I was going there. My first port of call was to meet these strikers. And then I got a call at Preston, which is about 2/3 the way to Glasgow. And they said, it's okay, we've won. We've won the strike. Okay. So I go to this hotel called the Village Inn, very big, expensive hotel in Glasgow. And as I'm walking along to go to it, the senior management of the hotel come out. And they say, oh, Mr. Corbyn, have you come to stay? I said, no. I've come to visit. I said, visit who? I said, the picket line outside your hotel. Are you going to join me? Anyway, they decided they wouldn't join me there. Well, I went over to the picket line, and they had demanded a 10% pay rise, an end to 0 hours contracts, and security of the safety of getting home at night at the end of late night shifts in restaurants and so on. And they won every single one of their demands. And you know what?
0 hour contracts, you have to explain. What is a 0 hour contract?
A 0 hour contract is where you get a contract to work for a company, but you are not guaranteed any work, but you have to be available to work. So if the company calls you up and says, we want you to work tonight, you've got to go and work. If you don't, they won't employ you at all. But you get no guaranteed income at all. The idea is to make the whole thing illegal, but at the moment, it isn't completely illegal yet. And so these workers managed to win an end to 0 hours contracts within that hotel group and chain. Fantastic. And do you know what the age of the leading shop steward is? No. A young woman aged 19.
19,
They won it. Young people won it. Young people in a union won it in Glasgow. If they can win it there, they can win it anywhere. We need to get young people into unions, leading unions as well.
Yeah. Going to the war topic, Jeremy, you often point to Iraq war as a historic turning point for Labour. And you say, okay, that was an important point in the history of Labour. Why do you describe it that way? Why was it a turning point also in Labour?
I was in Parliament all through the Iraq war. And after 9/11, George Bush came out in January with his Axis of Evil speech in the State of the Union address. And they'd already gone to war in Afghanistan, Britain, USA, and so on. And we founded Stop the War Coalition to oppose the Afghan war. It wasn't Iraq, it was Afghan at that time. Bush then made
2001 we are talking.
2001, yeah, 9/11, 2001, absolutely. Then we had the statement by Bush, and then they started saying that Iraq represented an ever-present threat to Western Europe and Britain in particular. And they concocted this story that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and within 45 minutes could land weapons anywhere in Europe. It wasn't true. It was nonsense. It was made up. And the whole thing was developed on the basis that we had to go to war against Iraq because they were a danger to all of us. And this argument went on in Parliament, and we started tabling motions against it, a number of us. And we had all these arguments about why there shouldn't be a war against Iraq, why instead there should be the weapons inspectors going in, which did go in, and which would have prevented the war if they'd been listened to and allowed back in. Blair was utterly convinced of this war. And I remember the last meeting we had with Blair, it was probably 2 days before the fateful parliamentary vote, which finally supported Blair, albeit with a lot of opposition. The last part of the meeting was Blair was sitting around a big table in the Prime Minister's office. And he said, right, any more questions? Yes, Jeremy, if you must. Tony, why are we doing this? We're doing it because it's the right thing to do. A lie and nonsense. Thousands died, billions were spent, and in the big rally we held in London in 2003, when we had well over 1 million people at that rally, I can remember my own speech. I said, this war, if it goes ahead, will create the terrorism, the insecurity, the poverty, and the wars of tomorrow. Since then, we've had wars in Syria, we've had wars in Libya, we've had continuous bombing in Iraq and other places. It set off a whole war agenda. That's why I opposed it. It was incredibly damaging to the Labour Party and Labour Party members. And ever since then, there's been this strong peace movement in Britain, centred roughly around Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament and Stop the War Coalition, both of which I'm involved with. And it's the same people that are now organising these enormous protests in support of the Palestinian people. So we've created a peace movement.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask something about that, because sometimes if you're speaking out against war and militarization, some people say, okay, but there is enough problems in Belgium. You should concentrate yourself in Belgium. Why are you talking about wars everywhere else? You know, this kind of arguments. But you build up this peace movement, this anti-war movement, together with the social movement. How did you cope, and how do you answer to this critic to say, Jeremy, there's a lot of problems, there's enough problems in the UK, concentrate yourself to the UK problems? What should you answer to that?
I also talked to those that were taken by the army to Afghanistan and to Iraq and to other places, and talked to them. And when I was leader of the party in 2016, when this report came out by Sir John Chilcot, which had explained how the bad decisions were made, the legal advice was ignored, and the way the Blair government behaved, I said, I will apologise on behalf of the Labour Party for the Iraq war. That day, I had streams of Labour MPs coming into my office demanding that I resign there and then. I said, why today? Because you've been demanding my resignation for ages. Why today? What's so important? Are you worried about what I'm going to say about Iraq and your complicity in it? So it was quite edgy conversations. So anyway, I didn't resign, of course not. So I went and gave an apology to an audience of military families, all of whom had lost loved ones in Iraq. I said, I'm apologizing to you for the desperate feelings you must have of losing a son or a daughter in a war that should never have happened. And then I talked to the military families and many ex-soldiers who are suffering severe PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and mental health problems as a result. That's the consequences of war. And when people say, well, actually, we're under threat, I say, well, actually, no, we're not under threat. We're under threat from poverty, inequality, and injustice within our society and in this world. What we have to do is look at the causes of war and look at what real security is. I mean, your security and my security, is it the ability to kill people in the Netherlands, to kill people in France, to kill people in Spain? Or is our security knowing that we've got a roof over our head, got food tonight, our children can go to a doctor, there's a school available for everybody else, and there's an emergency service if you fall ill? That's what security is for most people around the world. So why do we have to obsess ourselves with endlessly building more military alliances which create more tensions, and instead look at the social and unjust issues that face this world and try to prevent wars? Not easy, but anything's got to be better than spending all our resources on weapons of mass destruction, which can only kill people.
Yeah. You were always a strong voice for peace, but also for diplomacy. And we're living in times where diplomacy is becoming again a weird word. Like it's for softies, it's soft power, and we need some strong power. That's the language of today. Why it's so important for you to keep being this voice of diplomacy and peace?
You have to keep on raising the awkward questions and keep on making the point that there's got to be another way of doing things. And so I, like you, do not agree with what Russia has done in Ukraine. I do not support what they've done. But I don't want the war to go on. I want there to be an agreement, and I want there to be a diplomatic way forward. The diplomatic way forward was ignored and spurned on many occasions, not least by Boris Johnson, who actually virtually stopped Ukraine from coming to an agreement in 2023. And so the EU has failed, the UN has failed. The only ones that have really tried to bring about a diplomatic way forward has been the late Pope Francis, President Lula, and the African Union. Interesting, isn't it? It's the voices of the southern countries that are trying to bring about peace in a European context. Now, I hope there can be some kind of agreement reached, and if there has to be a peacekeeping monitoring force in Ukraine, fine, but it can't be European, it can't be NATO, it can't be American. That monitoring force has got to come from volunteers from Latin America, from South Asia, or from Africa. It's got to be the idea the rest of the world wants there to be peace. I hate the idea of young Ukrainians killing young Russians just as much as I hate the idea of young Russians killing young Ukrainians. This is like the First World War. And if we don't get a ceasefire and a way forward, there are shed loads of nuclear weapons available both for Russia and for NATO. That's the danger.
In 1987, so some time ago, you, together with Tony Benn, you campaigned, if I'm well informed, for a non-alignment point of view. Today, would you say that in Europe, like this non-alignment idea could revive, or what's your stance on the position of the European Union? But because it looks like the European Union suffered a a summer of humiliation. We had the tariff rip-off with Trump in the European Union. We had the 5% norm with the NATO, etc. So what should be the position of Europe in this changing world?
1987, the Cold War was very much still in full swing. And Tony Benn and I were great friends, and we used to meet at his house on Sunday evenings with other people, and we'd discuss lots of issues. And it was, to me, a huge education. I was a young Labour MP at the time. And we were against the militarisation, against nuclear weapons, and against the then growing demands for NATO to strengthen and expand itself. That was even during the Cold War. So we decided we'd found something called a Campaign for Non-Alignment, which was to develop a non-aligned foreign policy in which we would therefore not be beholden to NATO decisions and develop relations with the rest of the world. It got a lot of support. We, I think, did some good work there. 1990, essentially was the end of the Soviet Union. The Warsaw Pact collapsed. The Berlin Wall had come down. That was the golden opportunity to bring about real peace and real détente and real disarmament and reducing arms expenditure. And throughout the early part of the 1990s, defense expenditure across Europe and across the former Soviet area did go down. And then we came along with all the other wars that Bush and others inspired, and defense expenditure has now gone up. Last year, global arms expenditure reached $2.4 trillion, $2.4 trillion on arms. And this year, it'll go even higher. Is the world safer or more secure as a result of this? No. Who's made money out of this? The arms manufacturers. So I think we need, all of us, you and me together with everybody else, develop a foreign policy which isn't about building and spending more money on weapons, but is about investing in the social needs of people. And in the case of Britain, don't know about Belgium, but in the case of Britain, restoring the overseas aid budget, which Starmer specifically cut in order to put more money into arms expenditure. There's got to be a better and different way of doing things. And the last thing I'll say is about global inequality and insecurity, because we could talk about it all day, is that there are wars going on. Yes, we know about Ukraine and we know about Palestine. People don't know so much about Sudan, don't know so much about Congo or Yemen, or even for that matter, the conflict in West Papua. What's the conflict in the Congo really about? Minerals. It is about getting minerals out of Africa at very low prices, which will then be made into very profitable products by companies usually based in Western Europe or North America. What we have is a growing war about resources around the world. And we've got to understand that. And we've got to build our solidarity with people in the DRC, in Yemen, in West Papua, and develop a global peace movement. And if we don't do that, then what's the future going to be? The recolonization of Africa in order to steal all the resources? And here we are in Ostend, where Leopold did plenty of colonizing in the Congo and left that horrible mess behind, and also the tragedy of the deaths, I still think about it, of Patrice Lumumba in 1961, who had real leadership and real hope for the people of the Congo.
Maybe some last topic, we should be talking about Palestine and Gaza too. And you took an initiative because you're staying active on different fronts. You're a very inspiring and active man. And one of the things you and the Peace and Justice Coalition, I think, organized was a Gaza tribunal at the beginning of September. Maybe you should explain a little bit what does it mean, a Gaza tribunal, and what was the goal of this initiative?
We founded the Peace and Justice Project after the last election, which I described as a home for the politically homeless, and we have 60,000 followers in Britain who joined it. And we've done a lot of work on international things, and we have our weekend conference next week, 20th and 21st. 20th is international, 21st is domestic. It's all online from the Peace and Justice Project. If anyone wants to watch it, please join in. Last year, 25,000 watched it. I wanted to develop the idea of what is actually happening in Gaza and bring it home to people in the most meaningful way possible. So we set up what we called the Gaza Tribunal, which met over 2 days last week in London in a very formal setting in Church House, Westminster. Myself and 2 others were the assessors of it. One American Jewish Palestinian sympathizer, the other a Palestinian woman who's living in exile because she's not allowed to live in Palestine. And we had 29 witnesses, expert witnesses, who all presented their evidence in a very formal setting. It was all online. And they were incredibly powerful over 2 days. I'll give you an example. Eyal Weitzman, who runs an organization called Forensic Architects at Goldsmiths University in London, gave us chapter and verse on what is happening in Gaza, the bombing that's going on. They're already bombing to create the Riviera, which Trump has this wet dream about. And when they demolish a building, and Mustafa Barghouti's just texted me to say 3 more buildings have been destroyed this morning in Gaza, they don't even check for people in the buildings. There are Palestinian bodies that are going to become the foundations of the Riviera complex. It's unbelievably disgusting.
Wait, on 2 seconds. Wait, you're saying now that some architects are proving that for the plans to recreate a colonial Riviera, they plan and order also the bombing already to do that. That's what you're saying.
That's what forensic architects have come up with, the information and the evidence that the bombing is all designed around the plans for the Riviera system, which Trump has been pushing forward. And that's why they're trying to clear out Gaza City. We also had a number of doctors. Dr. Nick Maynard, he's a British surgeon who's been in Gaza many times. He just described 2 things. One was that he was treating people in the Shifa Hospital and the other hospitals. And he was looking at the patterns of gunshot on young boys. One day they'd come in with 5 or 6 boys been shot in the chest, and he would obviously do his best for them, obviously with very limited equipment. Next day they'd been shot in the testicles. The day after that they'd been shot in the back. And it was as though there was some unbelievably cynical activity by IDF soldiers who were deliberately using these young boys as target practice. He then described also operating on a young girl who he had to operate on because she'd got very bad chest injuries from gunshot. He had no antiseptic, no anesthetic, nothing. He only had his knives and his scalpel to try and save her life. And he said he couldn't believe how painful it was, obviously for her and for him to do it. And he's never forgotten her screaming with pain as they were trying to save her life. In that case, they didn't save her life. Victoria Rose, a very experienced surgeon, broke down herself just describing what she'd been through. And so we had 29 witnesses, including, interestingly, civil servants from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in Britain, who told us how they were pushed to change their reports on the illegal sale of weapons to Israel in contravention of the International Court of Justice genocide decision and the International Criminal Court decision on the arrest warrants for leading Israelis. We're producing all this as a video. It'll be out in the next few days, I hope. And we're also producing a lengthy, but it'll be online, written report and recommendations, which we're going to present to the Foreign Office and to Parliament to shame them into their disgusting behavior in continuing to sell weapons and parts for F-35 jets to Israel, knowing full well that acts of genocide were being committed with them.
Jeremy, all these everyday stories about genocide, like we're now in an era we can follow a genocide on a cell phone. It's unbelievable. And then at the same time of this horror in Palestine, a solidarity campaign from Palestine Action that was outlawed in the UK, and people were, I think even your brother was arrested in the action. You have to explain what is Palestine Action and why are they outlawed by the British government?
Palestine Action is a non-violent direct action organisation separate from Palestine Solidarity Campaign. they have taken direct action, including the occupying, going onto an airbase and painting some slogans on a plane. The government announced this was an act of terrorism and then did, in legal terms, what's called prescribing them. So it becomes a criminal act to support Palestine action in Britain. And about 1,000 people have already been arrested for carrying Palestine action placards around in central London. And to put it in context...
So if you have a placard with Palestine action, you can be arrested because you're supporting a so-called terrorist case.
And this is being legally challenged now, and the case comes up in court very soon. But to put it in context, the Terrorism Act 2000 is the law that's used by the government. About probably 200 people have been arrested in the past 25 years under the Terrorism Act 2000. 1,000 people have been arrested in the past months for supporting Palestine action as an alleged terrorist organization. I've got a feeling that the civil servants will advise the government, you're going to have to change course on this one. Many of us in Parliament who obviously voted against the prescription warned them, this is not sustainable, you can't carry it on, you're going to end up having to back down on this, and you know you are. And so we keep on making that demand. But we're going to be out there in our thousands supporting the people of Palestine, and we'll be out there as long as it takes to bring peace and justice to the Palestinian people.
Yeah. Jeremy, to close a little bit, there is the so-called the Hague Group from countries from the global south taking initiative also in the course for peace and also to condemn Israel. In your opinion, these initiatives coming from the global south, coming from the Hague Group, how important is it for you?
Absolutely essential. You and I both support Progressive International, which is a coming together of radical progressive parties, unions and organizations around the world. And after South Africa launched their genocide case at the ICJ, which I was invited by the South African government.
ICJ being...
International Court of Justice, meets in The Hague. I was invited by the South African government to go and observe the case, which I did. And you know what the result of that was. After that, we met in The Hague with representatives of Colombia, of Brazil, of Chile, of South Africa, of Malaysia, of Namibia, Indonesia, and a number of other countries. And we established the Hague Group. And then we held a conference in Bogota to formalize this. So we now have an active group, predominantly countries of the global south, formed the Hague Group in the UN to campaign in support of the ICJ and ICC decisions. Every one of those countries has now been subject to tariffs by the USA and economic and political attacks by the USA for standing up for the people of Palestine. And I'm going on a delegation with some Palestinians to South Africa at the end of this month to support the ICJ decision, and particularly to commend the South African government for their bravery in taking the case to the ICJ. No one thing is going to guarantee a safe, secure, peaceful and just future for the Palestinian people. But you add up all the things that we do, the demonstrations, the marches, the refusal of Palestinian people to be driven out of Palestine, all builds up this global case for Palestine. And that is something that we have got to do. It's the cause of our time.
Thank you. And these were wise words to conclude our meeting. Thank you very much, Jeremy Corbyn. Maybe you have some last words for the visitors of ManiFiesta here in Ostende.
To all the visitors of ManiFiesta, you deserve to give a big thanks to all those that organized it. But above all, when we have these sessions together like this, in the tents, in the rain, with the music, with the books, with the thoughts and the informal discussions we all have, we all leave here bolder, stronger and more determined than ever to create a decent, safe, secure, sustainable world for all the generations to come.
Ja. Dit is Kantelpunt, speciale editie in Ostende live op ManiFiesta. Er komen nog kantelpunten-uitzendingen, maar het belangrijkste is dat jullie ons blijven steunen. En dat kunnen jullie doen door te abonneren op Spotify, door te abonneren op Apple Podcast of op YouTube. Heel belangrijk, want wij hebben geen grote geldschieters. Wij hebben ook de steun niet van de grote media of grote kapitaalgroepen. Dus jullie steun is belangrijk. Alsjeblieft, abonneer je op Kantelpunt. Je vindt ons op de website. Dank je wel.
Dit is een podcast van Facto, het marxistisch mediaplatform van de PvdA. Als jij jezelf wel eens de vraag stelt, hoe zit de wereld nu echt in elkaar? Volg Facto dan op sociale media, op YouTube en op jouw podcastplatform. Abonneer je op ons WhatsApp-kanaal om alle nieuwste afleveringen exclusief binnen te krijgen. Facto, de wereld begrijpen om haar te veranderen.